This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to the May 13th edition of This Week in FCPA. Jay Rosen and I visit about the Panama Papers. You know several of the key lessons to learn in these two events going forward. I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to visiting you again. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special Thursday night edition of Friday morning's Blab session for This Week in FCPA with Tom Fox and Jay Rosen. The reason we're doing a special Thursday night edition is it's actually Friday morning where I'm at, which today is in Hong Kong, and I assume Jay is in It Never Rains, and indeed, is it always in sunny Southern California. Hello, Jay.
Hey, Tom. Good to hear from Hong Kong. Not to disappoint, it is sunny in LA. What brings you out to Hong Kong? Why do we get the honor of doing a special Thursday night version?
Well, I'm actually out here meeting with folks at the Red Flag Group. One of their corporate headquarters is here in Hong Kong. And so I'm out here meeting with folks, recording some podcasts, writing some articles, and getting ready to fire off in my new role as the compliance ambassador for the Red Flag Group. So pretty exciting week for me. And I'm somewhat reluctant, yet need to mention that you have pointed out that there is a baseball game going on. So why don't you tell us about that?
Well, we love to have friendly gentlemen bets on our podcast. And right now, Tom's Houston Astros, who were one game away from the World Series last year, are playing my perennial apologist Red Sox. So if anything appropriate happens during the podcast, I'll break in. We are now at the top of the third inning, and it is 3-1 Boston.
Yeah, I think the key words in that phrase was last year. So last time I looked, we were hugging the bottom of the American League. So looks like an unpropitious year for me to jump back on the bandwagon. But Jay,
well,
we had to go ahead.
I was going to tee you up for something. You read a really interesting blog this morning about the first inning, and talking about the first inning, we are very early in the baseball season, and it's just the beginning of May. So until we get more into the season, until we get to 4th of July and trading deadline, I don't think any firm decisions can be made, but there can be some learning that we can do about both the Astros and the Red Sox.
Well, I would have agreed with you before. I think it was last Friday. There was a lead article in the sports section that the Astros need not give up hope because, indeed, there was one team that had a worse record that won the World Series in the history of baseball, and so all we had to do was equal the 1914 Miracle Braves. And I thought, if that's your inspiration, you may start wanting to think about 2017. So,
well, you know where those Braves played their games, right?
Yep, indeed I do. So, Jay, we had yet another interesting week in all things FCPA, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, and maybe I could start by throwing out a couple of things. Probably the biggest news was the speech by Sally Yates of Sally Yates of the Yates Memo, where she talked about some of the things she's seen since the announcement of the new DOJ policy on individual accountability back in September of 2015. I found it interesting both for the compliance practitioner with some very direct lessons to be learned, but also she talked about its effect internally on the DOJ and how that component of the Yates Memo had really shifted things. And it really brought up what Mike Volkov said when the memo came out, which is the prosecutors follow what they're incentivized to do. And if they're incentivized and being graded on, and their superiors and supervisors are being graded on how many individuals they prosecute as opposed to the amount of dollars they bring in on corporate prosecutions, that's what they'll shift to. So I guess kind of the first thing is Ms. Yates disclaimed the notion that it should be the Yates Memo. She said she argued that it should be the individual accountability memo, but that she lost that battle internally to the point where now when companies are after self-disclosure and are bringing in information on individuals who may have culpability, they are putting together bound notebooks called Yates binders. And when your name is attached to a piece of evidence or some court proceeding or procedural matter, that pretty well signifies that you're going to be associated with that policy change for a long, long time. I would point, anybody who's a civil litigator knows what a Doe-Bear hearing is, and so I would point to that. But the kind of for the lessons to be learned, she made clear that companies need to turn over information on individuals, and that's going to be the key element as far as the Department of Justice is going forward. But the focus of the department itself has changed, both in the criminal side, where they're going to focus more on individuals, and then indeed even on the civil side of things. And that's really not something the DOJ talks about when it comes to FCPA enforcement, because the DOJ typically looks at the criminal side of things on that law. And she said that civil side lawyers are looking more now to bring civil suits, and previously the criteria was basically, did the individual have the ability to pay a fine and penalty if they lost a civil trial? And now the Department of Justice is beginning to see some deterrent effect in bringing a civil suit under laws such as the FCPA. So that, I thought, was a pretty interesting shift. She, of course, disclaimed once again the notion that anyone had to waive the attorney-client privilege, but that the DOJ wants facts. So interesting remarks by Ms. Yates. The second thing is, and we'll probably be talking about this for some time, is the continued fallout from the Panama Papers. And there's lots and lots and lots to talk about, lots and lots and lots to be learned. But I'd like to highlight just a couple of things and then maybe pitch it over to you, because I know you had some thoughts on what's going on because of them as well. So in the United Kingdom, we are having something called the International Anti-Corruption Forum in London, where David Cameron has announced some proposed changes to UK law regarding disclosure of ownership and beneficial ownership. Last week, after we recorded the This Week in FCPA, the U.S. government made announcements regarding additional information it would require from banks through change in Treasury regulations, change in IRS regulations. Two banks in the United Kingdom, Royal Bank of Scotland and NatWest, both announced that they were under investigation for having customers who were listed in the Panama Papers. And probably of all of those things, actually the biggest is the journalists who broke the story have created a searchable database for companies that the law firm Finca Incorporated in offshore locations. So now you can actually physically search by company, by country, by geographic region to see if any of your county's counterparties, customers, clients, anyone utilize that law firm to create an offshore entity. And this is going to be the biggest thing, I think, for the compliance practitioner. Clearly, early on in the Panama Papers case, yet here is a publicly available free resource that you can use to check, see if any of the folks you're doing business with, either on the sales side, joint ventures, teaming partners, or on the supply chain, have formed offshore entities where you don't know the true ownership. And this is something that really everyone in our little FCPA world needs to be cognizant of. So,
would it be fair to say, Tom, that if somebody doesn't take advantage of this resource to start performing an internal risk assessment, that our good friends at the DOJ and other like-minded organizations all around the world will certainly be scouring this database to look for people that they might want to talk to?
Well, I think they'll be scouring the database to see who's in there. But for people that we deal with in the chief compliance officer's office, or the compliance professional, or the compliance practitioner, you're now on notice that there's a publicly available database that you need to check and see if you are doing business with any of these folks. And it's a resource that's available to you. Due diligence is not a annual or biennial one-time event. It's really now a minimum best practices is ongoing due diligence, and you can certainly hire companies that can do that kind of database checks on a regular basis. But now with this database, if you've got any company that's associated in any way, shape, or form through Panama, or any of the law firm that's involved, you really need to check this database to see if any of your counterparties are on it.
So can I ask you one more, kind of dig down into this? What's coming to the forefront of this whole thing now is beneficial ownership.
Yes.
In the past, when people are performing a due diligence check, are they necessarily getting that beneficial ownership information, or are they just checking physical things like location of office and do they have employees, and is this a real business? Are those things happening simultaneously, or will beneficial ownership take a bigger role now?
Well, it really depends on the company's risk profile, I think. For instance, I know some companies here in Houston, in the energy space, would have a risk aversion to not doing business with anyone they couldn't identify all of the owners directly. Some companies have more of a risk tolerance and are willing to do that, hoping that they can manage the relationship after the contract is signed. I would say if you don't know who the owners are, it puts you in a very, very difficult position if it turns out those owners were foreign government officials or officials of state-owned enterprises that directed business your way, because it would sure look like it would be a mechanism to pay a bribe. So I would say it depends on the risk profile or risk tolerance of the company investigating it, but I would really suggest best practices is, if you don't know who the true ownership is, and you can't identify the beneficial owners, that's probably not someone you want to engage on a third party on the sales side under the FCPA.
So not only putting the company under warning, but also it may have some repercussions within the due diligence community, and having them figure out, how to dig a little bit deeper, and whether that can be offered at the same price point as the cursory due diligence, or because this is the stuff now that's really going to, separate those who have a problem from those who don't.
Absolutely. And I don't know if that information is going to be incorporated into the databases of companies that do due diligence at this point, or they'll have to run a separate search. But I don't think the cost is going to be the driving force, at least the driving factor in a DOJ analysis. Their factor is going to be not when did you get the information, it's did you use that information.
Absolutely. Tom, what else did you have on your list?
Well, I had is really sort of a continued fallout from this. We had David Cameron announcing yesterday, although maybe that's today in UK time, of initiatives around beneficial ownership in the United Kingdom and the Channel Islands, I think. But specifically, he was focused on there's a lot of real estate ownership in London, a very high-end real estate ownership where the true owners are not disclosed. They're through shell corporations. I don't want to say that's simply a problem in London. I think it's an issue across the globe, even certainly in the United States. Nevertheless, some initiatives by David Cameron, and also as a kind of a side point, I wanted to see if maybe we could go into David Cameron's was named in the Panama Papers as a person who received benefits of an offshore corporation. It came through one set up by his father, which he received some remuneration from. And I've been thinking about that in terms of I was going to just rag on Cameron, but then the other thought I had was, only Nixon could go to China. So maybe only someone who has had the advantage of an offshore corporation can really change those regs. So any thoughts on that?
You might be on to something there. I'm sure there is a certain motivation for him to be looking into this issue at this point in time. So I would tend to agree with you. And then there is even something else. I sent you an article, I think, last night, your time, up from the Wall Street Journal about a relative from the Malaysia Prime Minister who are also looking into this gentleman's finances, and he's got some very high-priced real estate in the Time Warner Center in New York City, near Lincoln Center, and he's got a little, I think about like $120 million fixer-upper down the road in Beverly Hills that he's working on. So again, it looks like, some type of sovereign wealth issue with money being parked in real estate, and I think that's really going back to this argument about the shell corporations and knowing the beneficial ownership of who actually owns what property.
And when you say down the road, I assume that means down the road from you in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, down the road from me. Yeah, on the other side of the valley.
So anything else really strike you this week?
Let's see what else we have here. I'm sure within the last day everyone has been following what's happened with Brazil, and the impeachment proceedings are proceeding ahead with President Rousseff, and stepping in for the next 6 months, as I understand it, is her second in command, and I guess you say Michelle Temer. And the one thing I was reading up on this is that I guess there were certain times when he was traveling and he was also presumed to be the president, and I believe he has the same potential exposure that President Rousseff has now, and I believe what will happen now is they will investigate her for the next 180 days. At that point, the legislature will reconvene and see whether or not they choose to press ahead with the impeachment proceedings, and then at that time she will be out of office. So there still is a very long way to go. Lots of companies being investigated, and then they have the Olympics that are supposed to be going on, and issues there with, will buildings be constructed in time, and will they be safe? So still, it's changing day by day there, but it's not a pretty situation.
Well, I was really intrigued by our good friend Andy Spalding. Professor Andy Spalding has had a couple of posts in the FCPA blog this week. The first one was an ebook he and several students put together around a project he led around, in anti-corruption in Brazil over the past year. But he also wrote about Dilma's impeachment in the context of a victory for the rule of law. So there's kind of one school of thought that says, Brazil is really stepping up into the forefront of democracies when they can take on this type of issue at the very highest levels. But I agree with you in terms of everything that's going on, and if we maybe even overlay the Zika virus as a health concern, if you're going to drop 500,000 or 1 million people, tourists visiting this summer, who knows how that's all going to play out. So, the Olympics, they always seem to come off. So it's because at the end of the day, it's about the athletes. So I guess we'll have to see.
Right. Tom, I think we also had on the list to, was there any more that you wanted to say about Unaoil, or did we kind of cover that within the Panama Papers?
Well, in Unaoil, I would just suggest that this is something that, in the context of additional information that becomes available to the compliance practitioner. A lesson to be learned early on in a case. We don't obviously at this point know about any legal liabilities for Unioil, from Unioil towards any of the third parties or any companies that may have hired those as third parties. That's to be determined. Yet, even at this early stage of the Unioil case, I think compliance practitioners need to be asking some very direct questions in their organization, starting with, is this somebody we've ever done business with? And if so, did we do due diligence on them? What was that due diligence? Did they show us a trace certification? Did we simply accept that? Or did we do something else? Do we have audit rights against them? If we have audit rights, have we exercised those audit rights? How have we managed that relationship? Were there any commission payments made or success fees paid which were outside the norm of our third parties? Lots of different questions. If you have engaged this company, they're certainly on the list of people of the Department of Justice is going to look at. Several companies have announced they've received letters or subpoenas from the DOJ for their contracting partnerships with Unioil, and this one is going to continue to unfold from a legal perspective as we move forward. Yet, even at this point, which I think is less than 30 days after the article, or maybe right at 30 days, it's still information that's available in the public record that a compliance officer or chief compliance officer, compliance practitioner needs to take action on inside of their company around their compliance program. So one of the things that I think it's going to be important for any compliance practitioner to understand is when information becomes available, even in the form of a newspaper article, now with the Panama Papers, with a searchable database, whatever it may be, you need to take that information and ask some questions in terms of your own compliance program. But if you want to flip it, maybe about how you could use it in a positive manner after the Walmart case was broken, or the story rather was broken by the New York Times, I talked to several compliance practitioners as early as the next Monday or Tuesday after the story broke on the Sunday in the New York Times, and they told me that they had used that as a teaching moment inside of their corporation to their senior management in terms of potential reputational damage. Some people used it as a way to re-emphasize the corporate policy on facilitation payments if they were banned. Sometimes if facilitation payments were acceptable under the company's compliance program, then they talked about the need for properly recording those facilitation payments and what was a reasonable facilitation payment. So if you have that information, it can be utilized. I think it's important to draw the lessons out no matter where we are in the life cycle. If you want to use the example bandied about this week in first inning, second inning, fifth inning, sixth inning, the first, second, third round of the NBA playoffs, whatever it may be. So lots to be learned. Well, Jay.
Yeah, so I had a comment there a second ago and I was on mute. So I guess I was going to, somewhat get to where you were getting about, teaching moments, but I think I want to nominate due diligence for being the FCPA thing that 2016 is all going to be about, by taking a look at Unioil and Panama Papers, and I really think it's shining a bright spotlight upon knowing who you're doing business and knowing your third-party relationships. And I really think this is going to ratchet things up, that people, especially not only contracting with people, but people doing M&A, that they're really going to start to take a look and make this due diligence be more than just the cursory stuff, but really start digging into the things you discussed about, to audit rights, to facilitation payments, and really to get an idea whether or not their company they're buying is clean. And there's already been a situation this year where I believe one acquirer is not going forward with an acquisition based to the alleged investigation that is happening at the target company. So I think we'll see more of these things in the coming year.
Well, Jay, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but I wanted to, if I could just take a couple of more moments to give a shout out. And that shout out is to Jay Martin. He is the Chief Compliance Officer at Baker Hughes in Houston. Jay is being honored this coming week at the Greater Houston Business and Ethics Roundtable, receiving our first Ethics and Compliance Award. And he is also featured this month on the cover of the SCCE magazine in an interview I did with Jay in conjunction with his receipt of the award from Gerber. So Jay Martin has been not only a good friend to many of us in the compliance field, but he's been a mentor, a leader, a thought leader, sharing his ideas and sharing his leadership inside of Baker Hughes, to the point where after he came on board at Baker Hughes in 2004, since that time there have been no reportable FCPA incidents, and that's for a company who at one time had the largest FCPA fine in the history of the world ever. So just wanted to give that shout out to Jay Martin. He's somebody that we all, although we would call him colleague, I think if you don't stand on his shoulders, you're certainly in his shadows. So that's really it from Hong Kong and my end. Any last thoughts?
I would also like to, second your thoughts upon Jay. He's a great teacher, and if you looked at his coaching tree, the way you looked at Bill Parcells' coaching tree, you would see many of the high-ranking compliance and ethics people in the Houston area had the privilege of serving under Jay and learning at his elbow. So congratulations, Jay, and everyone. Next week we will be back on our Friday morning schedule. So thanks for listening to Tom Fox and Jay Rosen on This Week in the FCPA.
All right, Jay, we'll look forward to continuing the conversation.